So let's move on and have a look at the day's business news. And for that, we're joined by France 24's Cole Stangler. Cole, we've seen some pretty solid gains, haven't we, in the markets over the last few days. How are investors feeling today now that Joe Biden has finally defeated Donald Trump in the US presidential election?
Well, they're feeling quite good. That post-election rally very much still in progress. At those Asian markets, for you first look at those Asian figures, gains really across the board so far in Asia today. The Nikkei index in Japan up more than 2%. It's actually now at a 29-year high. The Shanghai Composite up as well, 1.8%. We also have gains on the Hang Seng in Hong Kong and the Kospi in Seoul, both up around 1.25% there. You might say investors breathing a collective sigh of relief here. They were somewhat anxious about the possibility of sort of a long, drawn-out period in which the outcome of that presidential election remained uncertain. That anxiety, though, seeming to have now passed, now that we have outlets that have called the election for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that they've spoken already. Investors now can sort of move ahead to the next phase, which is what comes next. And so Donald Trump, of course, hasn't yet officially conceded that race, but the expectation, at least among investors, is that come January 20th, there will be a new president in the United States, and that president will be Joe Biden. Investors looking forward to that new period.
Cole, it's not just that, is it? I mean, what else explains the positive reactions that we're seeing on the markets?
Well, there's a couple of things in particular. One is investors looking to a potential change in U.S. trade policy, in particular when it comes to China. Now, we know very combative trade policy has been one of the pillars of the Trump administration, at least abroad. U.S. and China swapping hundreds of billions of dollars worth of tariffs on each other's goods. Joe Biden does broadly share a sort of tough on China approach. He's talked about the importance of buying American, talking about penalizing companies that send jobs overseas. Nevertheless, there is an expectation that the trade policy, in particular vis-a-vis China, will be somewhat less aggressive and at the very least somewhat less unpredictable. We've seen the Trump administration kind of very difficult to track. The Biden administration expectation is when it comes to China, you'll have at least a less unpredictable policy. And another interesting point that investors are looking at is you most likely are going to have a scenario in which you have a Democratic presidency and a Republican-controlled Senate that's gridlocked politically, but economically it means that perhaps for investors, the good news is that some of those more progressive economic policies that Joe Biden had been proposing, for instance, hiking the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28%, that's a lot more complicated to do when you have a Republican Senate. And so we might see perhaps less scrutiny of big tech companies like Amazon, Google, Facebook than that we may have seen if the Democrats had controlled the Senate. So the Senate is not determined yet, but Republicans looking like they're going to hold that Senate majority. Of course, that could change in January, when we have two runoff races in the state of Georgia. Everyone will be looking very closely at those races in Georgia. But right now, the expectation that investors are preparing for is that you have Joe Biden in the presidency and you have Republicans controlling the Senate. We'll see what happens, though, in January, of course.
Cole, thanks very much. Cole Stangler from our business desk there, working from home, as are many of the staff here at France 24 due to the coronavirus outbreak, of course.